From Microbe TV, this is TWiP, This Week in Parasitism, episode 196, recorded on July 7, 2021. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and joining me from New York, Daniel Griffin.
Hello, everyone.
It's Daniel and me.
I was thinking, Vincent, when we were scheduling, we were trying to make this work with everyone's schedule. We probably could have gone earlier. But unfortunately, I don't know if you've spoken to Dixon. He was in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if our listeners know that. He had to have some surgery. And last I spoke to him, he was preparing to get set up with rehabilitation. And then Christina Nala, she's off camping. So us two working stiffs.
All right, so this is Daniel and myself today. We can make this work. So Daniel, what was our case from last time?
Certainly. Well, let me, as I like to say, remind our people tuning back in and acquaint those who are tuning in for the first time. I was getting a little itchy just thinking about this case. We presented a gentleman in his 60s who does not have a permanent home. He actually lives on the streets of New York. And he came in with skin issues, reporting that he was itching, scratching all over. He comes in wearing a heavy coat, an unwashed polyester shirt, and he has these 1 centimeter diameter patches. They're erythematous. They're all over the torso and arms. And you can see there's several areas that are open because he's been scratching. And then we examine him, but I've got gloves on, by the way. And then I examine his clothes, specifically the creases of the seams of the clothes, and that's what gives us our diagnosis.
Daniel, was this a pre-COVID case?
This was a pre-COVID case.
Okay. All right, take that first case guess.
Certainly. Anthony writes, I had made a slight mistake in my last guess. Hookworms are not treated normally with ivermectin. Albendazole is the drug of choice for them. On to the man with an ectoparasite. I believe it is either lice or scabies mites. Treatment is normally topical pyrethrin. I am quite awful when it comes to insects and arachnids. However, I do quite enjoy the Arthropod podcast. Jody Green, one of the hosts of the show, has specialized in human ectoparasites. Perhaps could make for an interesting crossover event.
I think we did have the Arthropod podcast on.
Yeah, we did. We had, and actually, I think the host of the Arthropod may have helped us out with a review. Isn't he from Nebraska, maybe? University of Nebraska?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, he helped us out a little bit with the Arthropod section of our textbook in the last iteration.
Yeah. Episode 131, TWiP 131, April 15th, 2017. We will put the link in the show notes, Anthony, so that you can go find it.
Oh, this is great.
Andrew writes, Kia ora from Pongaroa. I'm crestfallen at having forgotten to send my guess in for case 194. Yes, it is still sitting in my draft folder. Would I have won? Probably not. And winning is not the point, but I am annoyed at myself and feel absolutely lousy. See below.
I like that.
My guess for the homeless man in his 60s is Pediculus humanus, the body louse. PD7 tells me that unlike the species that specialize on hairy parts of the body, this arthropod lives in clothing and only goes onto the body for blood meals. Sending this straight away to make sure I am in the next TWiP-isode and book draw. Nah, Andrew.
All right. Gabrielle writes, hello to everyone. I am a biologist and I studied animal parasitology in school. I also have experience having grown up in a farm in Rosarito, Baja California, Mexico. and learned firsthand about both animal and plant parasites. The fact that the inspection of the patient did show the cause or culprit of the symptoms, and the heavy coat did, leads me to think of a parasite like bedbugs, which do not actually live on their host, but on their bedding, or in this case, clothing. The size of the red skin marks of 1 centimeter is within the range of possible reactions of the skin when bitten by this insect. The itching goes well with this diagnosis, including the persistent itching as to cause breakage of the skin and scabbing. Thank you, Gabrielle. P.S. I am new to Microbe TV and have started spreading the news to my fellow biologists and teachers. Thank you for the knowledge and discussions.
Annie writes, hello again from Baltimore. It sounds like the patient is infested with body lice, which like to hide and reproduce within the folds of heavy clothing.
All right. Sophie writes, that was a short one. Happy month, everyone. Happy summer. And if I remember this correctly, happy B-Day to Dixon. My guess for this case is scabies. Speaking of homeless people, did the homeless in New York get vaccinated just like the homeless in Massachusetts did? If they did, then along with vaccination, they could be checked and treated for scabies or other things. The Red Cross in Serbia did a good job with vaccinating the homeless by setting up shelters where they offered food and vaccine info, and most of the homeless said, yes, vaccinating sounds like a good idea. All the best, Sophia. I'll answer that about the vaccines. We actually did a bit where what we did is we reached out to the soup kitchens. And, homeless people have to eat. So a lot of them have a relationship with the soup kitchen. So we would go out to the soup kitchens and work with the people there. So when the homeless individuals would come for meals, we would do the vaccination, and that would actually allow us to keep track. So, 3 or 4 weeks. For us, it was 4 weeks. We'd get them that second dose.
Nice. Very good. Elise writes, Dear TWiP Trifecta, I do hope this finds you all well. It is 70 degrees F, 21 C here in lower Manhattan. I had occasion to think of all of you yesterday because I brought my family to the Bronx Zoo, where we spent time admiring the penguins and Arctic terns that you visited for TWiP 110. As you can see, I am not afraid to travel, and I do love the Staten Island ferry, but getting a sluggish teenager out to a part of the island that was far from public transportation was trickier than it sounds on the face of it. I have a guess diagnosis for TWiP 195, the gentleman with extremely itchy skin, but I'm unsure. I'm wondering if the patient has bed bugs that are living in his clothing that he doesn't have the opportunity to change often. While some people manage not to notice bed bug bites, many do have an itchy hive-like reaction to them. Dr. Griffin said that the diagnosis was made by examining the patient's clothing, which could suggest that the parasite itself was not inside his body. Bed bugs live in places where they can have access to their blood meals, which is why beds with their sleepers on top of them are such common habitats for them, but don't actually reside within the human body. I considered the possibility that the patient might have had scabies because those mites cause people to be tremendously itchy, but scabies mites are so hard to see without magnification, I'm leaning towards thinking the patient's problem is bed bugs. You can see them hang on to fabric between blood meals. Their bites can cause those small red patches with substantial itching, and the case was solved by finding something on the gentleman's clothing. Treatment would involve de-infesting the patient's clothing and belongings, and then providing topical ointments and an antihistamine to reduce the itching, and taking care of any area where the skin is broken to avoid infection or cellulitis. This was a sad case, whether or not I guessed correctly, and I hope that the patient could get relief. Perhaps some success with the itching can provide him with a degree of trust, and he can begin to seek help for some of the other issues he struggles with. As always, thank you so much for everything you do. Many, many best wishes, Elise in Lower Manhattan. And Elise sent a snapshot of some of our Bronx Zoo penguin friends relaxing on the holiday weekend.
I think that's great. All right. Byron writes, distinguished TWiP hosts. My guess for the case of TWiP 195, the gentleman suffered from bed bug bites, a.k.a. Cimex lectularis and Cimex hemipterus. Thanks for all the podcasts, as I have learned a great deal. All the best, Byron.
You see, I like the way Elise went through her logic, right? And,
I do like that. I like the thinking.
Yeah, and then others just say, this is what it is.
Yeah, I will say, several courses use TWiP, right? And they go through this thought process.
Yeah.
And it's very educational to hear, what are you thinking? So Byron, next time, like, tell us what you're thinking, what's going through your head, because that thought process itself, whether you get the right answer or not, can be very educational.
Cheryl writes, "Hi, Vincent, Daniel, and Dixon. The case presented for diagnosis is a homeless gentleman in his 60s wearing a heavy coat and an unwashed polyester shirt. This gentleman's malady includes pruritus, 1 centimeter diameter skin patches, and open erythematous areas covering much of his torso. The clue to the solution involves examining the patient's clothes. My diagnosis is body lice pediculus humanus, also known as pediculus humanus corporis. In the YouTube video Parasites Without Borders, Chapter 21, Medical Handbook for Limited Resources, D&D, Daniel and Dixon, discuss head, body, and pubic lice. Dixon cites a book called Rats, Lice, and History and mentions that body lice are dangerous because they can spread epidemic typhus. He notes that such lice decimated Napoleon's army. WHO's website states that louse-borne typhus fever is the only rickettsial disease that can cause explosive epidemics. The clincher on this case is the clue about the clothes. Body lice, a.k.a. clothes lice, live and lay lice eggs on clothing. They usually only move to the skin to take a blood meal. Okay, that does it, though there's a lot more fascinating detail online. I'm an attorney with a JD from UCLA, and also a broker here in Hawaii. I love nature and science, have listened to all TWiV, TWiM, TWiP, TWiVO, Immune since stumbling on Vincent's TWiP voice in March 2020. I'm a huge admirer of the podcasts and the video lectures. Hope to win the actual book, though books are obsolete. I read with my phone now. I do still love the scent of fresh pages and cracking that spine open. Aloha, you guys are awesome. Happy birthday, Dixon. Cheryl.
All right. Alexander writes, "Hi, it's body lice. Regards, Alexander."
Oh, that was a short one. Take the next one.
Erica writes, "Hi, TWiP. Sounds like the gentleman from episode 195 was suffering from body lice. Fortunately, it's easy enough to cure, although the same can't be said for the socioeconomic conditions that are conducive to infection. I'm happy to say I've finally become a subscribing member to Microbe TV. The knowledge and company I've gained from you guys has been invaluable, and I'm looking forward to lots more of good times even after the pandemic. Keep up the excellent work, Erica." And we get a weather, 21C, partly cloudy, Toronto, Canada.
David writes, "Dear wise men of TWiP, I'm going to go ahead and say that the patient with pruritus is suffering from an infestation of pediculus humanus, or body lice. Treatments include a battery of ointments and a list. He gives a reference with a list. PD 7th edition recommending permethrin. However, the real challenge is personal hygiene, I presume. I do not think it is plausible for a homeless person to change underwear and clothes regularly, and I can't but feel for them. Thanks for bringing the plights of less fortunate to general attention. My deepest respect to you all." David from Nicaragua, where the rainy season finally seems to have arrived. P.S. I finally won the book last episode and will try to bring this to attention in my following responses so I am excluded from the lottery. P.P.S. I was glad it was mentioned there's a new Parasite Course available. Having started with TWiP around episode 70, just before the arrival of Dr. Griffin, I did take the Dr. Despommiers lectures, as were mentioned during earlier episodes, and went through the first 35 or so as a Parasitism 101. But by then, this latest course had not been uploaded yet. I also noted that there are certification exams now, which is great to monitor progress in understanding and hands-on knowledge.
All right. Caroline writes, "Hi, everyone. For this case, I suspect the patient is suffering from pediculosis corporis caused by body lice. Bites from the louse produce skin lesions and severe pruritus due to an allergic and/or inflammatory reaction to the louse saliva. Intense scratching of the bites can lead to skin excoriation. These were observed in the patient. Diagnosis is usually confirmed by finding eggs and lice in the seams of clothing, as I suspect happened in this case. In the U.S., cases of body lice infestations most commonly occur in the homeless population. Infestations are strongly correlated with poor body hygiene and lack of access to clean clothing. Treatment is usually to improve the patient's hygiene and wash their clothes. However, with a homeless patient, this would seem to be a short-term solution. Without access to a regular clean clothes, it is likely this will reoccur. Thanks again and stay safe. Caroline from Canada.
Katie Jane writes, "Hi all, 61F and cloudy here in north central Wisconsin, our first cooler day in a while. For the case study, my differential, anything bitey and itchy, fleas, lice, mites. Sadly, these are all common problems in homeless populations. My first thought was scabies, but from memory that tends to manifest between the digits and is diagnosed by a skin scraping, not the person's clothes. Fleas seem more plausible. Even though the patient doesn't have a dog, it's highly likely that he associates with people who do. However, according to PD7, fleas tend to cause more itching on the arms, leg, face, and neck, and not the main trunk of the body. Head lice and pubic lice are usually found on the body in regions where there is hair, whereas body lice are usually found on clothing. The fact that there is a disease called vagabond's disease caused by body lice shows the common occurrence of body lice infestations of people without a fixed abode. This disease results in a darkening of the skin due to extreme pruritus, which fits with the description given. My guess is human body lice. Thanks again. As always, I'll be looking forward to the next episode. Katie Jane is faculty at North Central Technical College."
All right. Catan writes, "Hello, TWiPers. The poor fellow was suffering from body lice. The body louse is a blood-sucking insect that infests humans. Besides making a person extremely itchy, body lice can also act as vectors of disease for Rickettsia prowazekii, causes epidemic typhus, Borrelia recurrentis, causing relapsing fever, and Bartonella quintana, causes trench fever. Excessive scratching can also cause infection. When the gentleman's clothing was examined, the lice could be found in the crevices and seams of the garments. During the winter, street people may huddle together to share body heat, and they also end up sharing these critters as well. Lacking access to daily changes of clothes, laundry facilities, and bathtubs, their clothing becomes infested with the lice. And see this link for images. The question is, how can this problem be realistically treated? Homelessness is often accompanied by mental health issues, alcoholism, drug addiction, as well as poverty. Do you just give the guy a shower, incinerate his clothing, issue a new suit, and send him on his way? If so, when would you expect him back for follow-up treatment? I'm hoping there is a better ending to this story than my sarcastic remarks suggest. But I see this as a societal issue rather than one that can be corrected medically in the case of homelessness. After writing up my guess, I'm beginning to appreciate the deer flies that endlessly pursue me every time I set foot outdoors during the summer. They are flying bloodsuckers that give me giant welts, but at least I have the ability to escape them. Catan, our grass-fed beef cattle person.
Daniel, have you ever seen typhus or relapsing fever or trench fever?
So relapsing fever, yes. And there's a couple different types of relapsing fever. The epidemic typhus you often see in like places where people have fled war in these camps that get set up.
All right. Owen writes, "Dear TWiP team, my guess this month is that this gentleman has human body lice based on the fact that looking at his clothes gave the answer. I imagine that what we're seeing were egg casings and or live lice. Very unpleasant. A differential would be scabies based on his potential risks and symptoms, but I'm not sure what would be visible on the clothes to confirm that diagnosis. Thanks as ever. Keep doing what you do."
Martha writes, "Dear TWiP team, I'll try to keep this short since I'm sure you will get many responses to this case. I enjoy Dr. Griffin's case presentations. I am sure that enigmatic smile is due to the pleasure of educating his fellow humans and not due to the joy of obfuscating. The fact that the diagnosis was made by looking at the clothes makes me think of ectoparasites, since this podcast is not this week in contact dermatitis. Now, the detail of the polyester shirt and the heavy coat, what are we to make of that? Is it hinting that the parasite is something found in a warmer climate that has found a suitable local environment? Is it hinting that the shirt is occlusive, preventing the exit of a parasite that would usually not stay within the host? Is the discussion of the sleeping arrangements meant to make us wonder if some bed bugs are adapting to the coat as a hiding place? I am sure that Dr. Griffin is an expert naked eye entomologist who could identify a multitude of parasitic creatures. However, I think I am overthinking this and not keeping this short. I will go with the human body louse. The man's living conditions are consistent with this diagnosis. Lice are known to hide in the seams of clothing. Their bites cause pruritus and chronic infestation that can lead to discoloration and thickening of the skin. Hoping to win the book. Best wishes to you all, Martha.
Drusi writes, I guess for TWiP 185, a man with no stable home presenting with pruritus might be suffering from body louse infection. Thank you. All right.
You want to take the next one, Vincent?
Yeah, sure. Why not? This is from the Parasitology Club. That's our last one. Parasitology Club in the University of Central Lancashire, right? Dear TWiP professors, a warm welcome from the University of Central Lancashire. We are based in the largest region of the UK in the city of Preston. This is near to Manchester City. We're baking in the hot sunny weather at an amazing 23 degrees Celsius, as we write. Oh, yeah. Today, it's 33 right now, and it's 5:16 p.m.
Yeah, it's hot. It's hot here.
Very hot. We love hearing your amazing podcast, and we have come to a conclusion. The TWiP 195 case as follows. The destitute male patient presented in hospital with an excoriating itchy rash, mainly on the trunk. We determined that the gentleman has a body louse infestation, and the clue regarding examination of the overcoat suggests that ectoparasites were visible on the garment. This could be the body louse, Pediculus humanus. The body louse is an ectoparasite whose only host is humans. The lice need the host and sits near the body for blood meals and comfortable temperature. Body lice area 1 to 3 millimeters in length and would be easily seen by the naked eye on clothing. We discarded the head louse, Pediculus humanus capitis, as there was no mention on infestation of the hair and scalp. We also discarded the alternative diagnosis of Sarcoptes scabiei, variety hominis, as this parasite is too small to be seen with the naked eye and generally burrows through the epidermis, so would be less likely to be seen on clothing. We concluded that the size was the important diagnostic feature of this parasitic infection, and this is quite common in persons that are living in destitute situations as well as war refugees. People displaced by natural disasters can cause other complications of this nature. Treatments include shampoo, lotions, creams are available, followed by a second treatment after 7 days. Reapplying the treatment after 7 days will ensure any lice are killed before they're old enough to lay more eggs. Preventative measures include washing clothing, towels, and bedding in a washing machine, hot cycle to ensure the lice are killed and prevent reinfection. As this patient is homeless, he will need further support and is at higher risk to reinfection as to the places that he visits or sleeps in areas that other homeless people visit are more likely infected also. Newsflash, a new variant of head lice has appeared and they are resistant to all conventional treatments. This has left scientists scratching their heads.
I like that.
And the club from Central Lancashire sends a picture of the life cycle of the body louse. We have eggs, we have first stage larva, we have second stage larva, third stage, and then finally the adult. And I guess each stage, they take a blood meal at each stage.
Yeah, that's usually, and I think when you first get introduced to parasitology, almost so much to memorize, and then you start realizing there's certain rules of thumb, so to speak. So
we look forward to your next TWiP case. All the best from a very warm, sunny place in Preston, UK. Thank you, Parasitology Club. And that does it for today. It's a few shorter than usual, but I assume that's because it's the summer and, people are chilling, right?
Not here in New York. We're roasting here in New York.
It comes and goes, doesn't it? Some days it's cool, and then some days it's unbelievable, right?
Yeah. And we've been having these storms, and if people are following, we had quite a storm last night. And I live right next to a bay where there's a lot of boats, and there are these little microbursts, these sort of localized storms. And this was so severe. There was actually a Danish couple that are here. They sailed across the Atlantic. And their boat actually dragged anchor, was flown into one of the other boats in our fleet. So
Wow.
Boats thrown off docks. It was quite something here.
So we had 12, let's see, I'm counting them up, 11, 12, 13, that's Martha. Well, we had quite a few, 14 and 15 and 16, 17. We had 17 guesses. Yeah, we usually have in the 20s.
All right. Well, Vincent, what are you thinking?
Well, I have to say that I thought of body lice as soon as you said this is a homeless guy, and you found the lice in the clothing. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can see them; they like to stay there, except when they're taking a blood meal. So, and I love some of the differentials we got. I think it's nice thinking on the part of many listeners.
Yeah, no, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I didn't really think about this, but could, in a homeless population, could a bed bug start to actually live in the clothes, sort of his bedding? But no, in this case, it was actually an adult body louse. Actually, you could see several of them as you went through the clothes with your gloves on in the different seams. And then I think what people bring up is how do you approach this? And this really, there are things you could do at the individual level, but this really is a big socioeconomic challenge.
Sure.
I don't know if people know, at one point many years ago when I was younger, actually probably in high school, my father was actually working with Mayor Koch. Do you remember Mayor Koch?
I do.
Remember
How we
Ed
doing?
Koch?
How we doing?
Yeah, Ed would swing by the house in the mornings, and my dad and him would head off. And my dad was trying to work on helping to create more shelters, more housing for the homeless. And, they started off with however many thousand homeless people. They built that many thousands of units, the city did. And at the end of the time, there were that many thousand homeless people still on the streets. So the problem just keeps expanding as quickly as we try to address it. The big thing here is the clothes issue. These individuals don't have access to places to clean their clothes. They usually don't have changes of clothes, right? Like what would they do when their clothes were being cleaned? So, and heat is critical. You actually need to clean your clothes in hot water above a certain temperature. And I think one of our emailers commented on that. And that's a big thing in some of these refugee camps that I referenced. If you can't get the temperature up to a certain point to kill these as you wash, they'll persist. So usually what we do in a setting like this, the clothes are taken away. They're given replacement clothes from sort of a Goodwill bin. We'll use a permethrin cream, but really it's the clothes that are the source of the infection here. And yeah, the solution, like so many times in neglected diseases, is a socioeconomic. It's a social solution, not so much necessarily a one-on-one solution.
So you provide fresh clothing, and then the lesions will go away eventually, right?
Yeah, he'll stop being bitten, right?
Yeah.
Because we remove the ectoparasite. You're using the permethrin, and that's providing probably some level. But most of the eggs, most of the lice, they're really on the clothes. So it's really, I think it's properly a clothing louse, even though we call it the body louse. And this has been an issue. I think it wasn't until the 1900s, the first war, where more people were killed by weapons and bullets than by disease. And the body louse was a big part of that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, they're going to just get reinfested, right? Because
yeah, it's a social problem, and they go back out, and we haven't taken everyone in that cluster, in that camp, and deloused them. So yeah, it's just a question of how often these individuals end up requiring care.
So they pick it up when they go to a shelter and are close to other people. Is that right?
Either a shelter or they're living together on the streets, sort of huddled together, and so it'll pass from clothes to clothes. Yeah.
Okay. You got a dog there, Daniel?
I do. Can you hear it? That's one of my service dogs.
It's okay. It's very faint. Yeah, you might have heard mine before when someone knocked on the door. He started barking too.
Yeah, it was exciting. I'll say last weekend, I don't know if our listeners know, but I help train and we foster service dogs.
Hmm.
And other than this dog, which maybe you can figure out why they didn't pass, all the other dogs that we have fostered graduated and became full-fledged service dogs.
Nice.
So exciting.
So this one didn't pass?
No, she much prefers being a pet. So,
I see. So you're keeping her?
we are keeping her.
So how many dogs do you have?
Right now we have 2, and then what we do is, periodically, like during the pandemic, when there's been an issue, we'll jump in and we'll foster a dog for a while.
Cool. All right, let's give away a book. We had 15 eligibles because some people have already won books. So let's see what we get between number 1 and number 15. It's number 13. That's Martha. So,
Okay.
Martha, send your address to TWiP@microbe.tv. If you're outside of the U.S., include your phone. I'll need that. And, we're now getting to the point where maybe Daniel can pay a visit and sign the books that I have in my office so that I can ship them out.
Well, I think aren't we gonna move them all to the new studio? And
That's
then I
right.
will come in and hopefully Dixon will be out of rehab and we'll get a lot of signed copies.
That's right. That was the plan. We'll bring them down to the incubator, and you guys can all go there and sign them. Right. All right. We have a cool paper today, which Daniel picked out. It's published in Nature. What is it? NPJ Vaccines. Nature Partner Journals Vaccines. Messenger RNA expressing PFCSP induces functional protective immune responses against malaria in mice. It comes out of a collaboration, Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, the Geneva Foundation, Naval Medical Center, the Henry Jackson Foundation for Military Medicine, Oak Ridge Institute, General Dynamics, Leiden University, University of Pennsylvania, Acuitas Therapeutics. Is the Army interested in malaria, Daniel? I guess so.
They are very interested, as some of our readers can probably guess. This is a major issue for the military, right? When you go to these different places, and you say, "Oh, well, they'll just take the prophylactic medication," but that's an issue. People don't always feel so great. So yeah, malaria has always been a major issue, and I think I love the introduction, right? How many times do you need to say this? But you do. They talk about the fact that in 2018, right, go back before the pandemic, 228 million clinical cases of malaria, over 400,000 deaths worldwide. These were huge numbers, right, until COVID came along and it starts to dwarf these numbers. But this has always been the major parasitic disease throughout the world, particularly throughout sub-Saharan Africa, parts of South America, Southeast Asia.
So we talked recently about a malaria vaccine, which was, I think, on a virus-like particle platform, right?
We did.
And so this one, as you can tell from the title, is an mRNA vaccine. Do you think they began this before COVID, Daniel?
They make the story as if they thought of this idea with the success of the mRNA vaccines. At least that's the way they're telling the story. So, we don't want to challenge that.
Okay.
And maybe there was a certain amount of excitement because we've talked a little bit about the basic science, where it's been identified that the Plasmodium falciparum circumsporozoate protein. And I always like, what is that? It's the protein that's all around the sporozoite. So it's not a different stage, is a major target. And we discussed that previously. And now really their idea is maybe we can deliver that as an antigen using this successful mRNA vaccine technology.
So if you can block the CSP, then you will block liver invasion. Is that right?
And this is probably a great time for us to bring the readers back up. I always feel, when Dixon is here, this is so second nature to him, but maybe our listeners not so much. But yeah, the life cycle with malaria is you are basically infected from a mosquito, and that mosquito is going to inject the sporozoites. And in a matter of minutes, those sporozoites are going to invade the liver, and then they'll go from the liver to the RBC, the red blood cell, the erythrocyte phases. So this is targeting that sporozoite stage parasite. And that's a window, right? That's maybe 15 minutes on average that these sporozoites are exposed, are vulnerable. So yeah, this is the target. This is preventing you from getting really sick at all. Prevents you from getting that dormant hypnozoite in the case of Vivax or of Valley, prevents you from getting that erythrocyte infection in all the other species.
So it's very much like a virus. You inhale a virus in a respiratory droplet. Maybe in a few minutes it infects your epithelium, right? So even if you're immune, it's hard to prevent that initial infection. Maybe it would take a few hours or days, for antibodies to get going there. And so, but you will be protected against disease. So I just wonder if blocking, in the case of malaria, blocking liver invasion is too high a bar, because
that was actually what occurred to me. I mean, they're looking at achieving sterile protection against infection in this. And it sort of makes me think maybe we're going to need a multivalent vaccine. Let's hit the sporozoite, but then we want to have backup, right? Let's have another target should it break through that first barrier. Because as we know, particularly with travelers to this area, you mentioned the military, if a person has never seen malaria, it doesn't necessarily take a large inoculum or even a large amount of parasitemia, not necessarily a large percentage of red blood cells infected, before they get quite ill. Where someone from the endemic area might actually have a significant amount of percentage of infected red blood cells, and they're still doing fine. They're not particularly symptomatic.
Well, they basically made an mRNA for the circumsporozoite protein and put it in a lipid nanoparticle.
Sounds familiar.
Very, very familiar. And they show that the mRNA, if you introduce it into cells, gives rise to the right protein, which of course is something you need to do. And then they tried different kinds of lipids to encapsulate this. They have a variety of formulations, which they try. One is by TriLink, one is by Acuitas Therapeutics, and then they immunize mice with these lipid nanoparticles, which probably the same thing was done for COVID vaccines. They had to go into mice first and maybe non-human primates as well and see if you get an antibody response. They measure it first by ELISA, and then they have an assay they call the Inhibition of Liver Stage Development Assay. So they take individual mouse sera, pool them, and test them at a dilution for inhibition of liver stage development. I'm not quite sure what that assay is. Let me take a look at it.
Yeah. I mean, while you're going there, they also do, and I think maybe our listeners are now starting to get familiar with this, they're starting to look at the cytokine profile. So we talk about the Th1 versus the Th2. And as early as figure 1, you start to see with the different approaches and doses, what sort of interferon gamma, right? That's going to be our signature cytokine for our Th1 response.
Why did they do that? Why did they look at cytokine profiles? Do they have an idea of what should be prevented?
I have to admit, I wasn't sure. They sort of after the fact, suggest that's what you're sort of after, but I'm not sure I know. I mean, it's an interesting, if you're trying to block the the sporozoites, do you want to have a high level of antibody? Do you want to skew this towards a Th2? Do you really want to skew it towards a Th1? So, I mean, I would say from my perspective, it was interesting to look at a correlation between what type of signature and what type of protection they were going to get. So
the cytokine profile is a consequence of immunization, is that right? Not infection.
Consequence of immunization. So the idea is they're giving, and they start in figure 1, they're giving the injection, and then they're looking not only at antibodies, but they're looking at the cytokine responses to these different injections.
All right.
And what you're theoretically going to do is see the right skewing of the cytokine response.
So for malaria, what skew would you want? You would want
it's an intracellular parasite in general, so I would think Th1. But then again, right, we're trying to create an antibody response to get these sporozoites before they get into cells. So I'm not sure I know the answer, to be completely honest.
They did see a Th1 skewing though with their immunization, which is for cytotoxic T cells, right? Cellular responses, right?
Yeah, which sort of makes you wonder, how is the mechanism working versus.
No, you're right. If you want it to prevent it from getting in.
Yeah, what are you doing going after the intracellular with a Th1 response? So yeah, it's interesting.
They also look at one versus multiple doses, right?
They look at different intervals, right? Showing as I think we would expect that if you increase the interval to 6 weeks, looks like you're getting a better response.
It's kind of like reminiscent of the COVID vaccines where you wait a bit longer, you actually get a better response. You get a more durable response than 3 or 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, and they actually, if you go jumping ahead to to figure 3, if people are actually looking at it, when you go from the 3-week immunization schedule to the 6-week, you see a big chunk of percent uninfected, going from like 40% up to 80% for one of the approaches.
Yeah, they try also different amounts, 30 micrograms, 10.3 micrograms, reminiscent of COVID vaccines. How many micrograms are in the Mrna and Pfizer? Do you remember?
No.
I think one of them is 100.
One of them is 100. I believe that's true.
I remember early on when Chuck Knersch was with us on TWiV updates, he was talking about high doses of Pfizer, of course. So then,
and I know with the younger kids, they're using lower doses to see, which makes sense.
And then they do a challenge study, right? In rodents, transgenic rodents expressing the human malaria antigen. So this is a P. burgii transgenic parasite line. So then they immunize these mice and they challenge them and measure, I guess what are they measuring? Blood stage parasitemia, right? So that's after the liver invasion, right?
Yeah, so it's going to go liver and then it's going to end up in the red blood cells.
So the blood stage parasitemia will give you an indication of how well you inhibited the liver stage, right?
Exactly, because they're trying to go after, as mentioned, sterilizing. So you don't want any of it to get into the RBCs.
So here, 40% efficacy for high dose, 20% for low dose, which is not great, right? They should improve that.
Yes, which they will do.
They actually give a third dose to try and do that, and they don't do a challenge with the third dose. I suppose they didn't get a high enough boost with the antibodies, but they do this 6-week interval, as you said, and they can get 88% efficacy. I don't know what efficacy means. I guess it's a reduction in the blood forms, right?
They're reporting it as percent uninfected. So they're claiming 88%
sterile protection.
Yeah, sterilizing protection.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Which is pretty impressive. Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I'll have, right, is what's the durability, right? Because as sort of thought, this is probably going to be dependent on having a high level of antibodies, right? 'Cause you have a very narrow window to knock out the sporozoites. So how often do you need to boost this to stay at that level?
They also try different formulations, and they differ according to efficacy, right? 60% for one and 20% with another. So it just goes to show that not all LNPs are created equal. Right?
Yeah, I think we've seen sort of both sides, right? Your mRNA might make a difference, like what you put in, but then also what you're packaging it with may affect the efficacy as well.
So you have to sort that out before you go into people, and clearly Moderna and Pfizer had sorted it out pretty well because they both came up with similar efficacies, right?
Pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
A new bar for vaccines. But I think this is interesting. I think, a couple of things I really liked about this paper was this sort of natural, right? Now that we've seen such tremendous efficacy with the mRNA vaccines in COVID, what else can we go after? But now we're starting to see sophistication. Not only does it matter what mRNA we might put in there, what are we going after as a target, but also subtleties into the boosting schedule, the boosting number, the packaging might affect the response. But this is much more impressive than I think anything we've seen to date. We're still in a mouse, so give it that caveat. But boy, what potential impact could we have on human disease if we can move this into humans?
But I think they mentioned they still need to do work on immunogenicity, efficacy, durability, how long it lasts before you would even go into people, right?
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think that this is really nice proof of principle more than anything.
Yeah,
Pretty impressive proof of principle, but yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to try different pathogens in the mRNA platform. In fact, yesterday we did a TWiV with Ron Fouchier. I'm sorry to tell you, Daniel, it was TWiV 777.
Okay.
But there is a 787, right?
That's okay. That's what I'm going after, the large airplane. 777 is just lucky.
It's not an airplane?
I don't know, actually, if there's a 777.
I thought there was. Anyway, he said that the current flu vaccines, these are 1940s technology, just an activated virus. He said they have a very, very poor T-cell response. And so as the antibody protection wanes because of variants that arise, they have to change the vaccine because there's no T-cell protection. And he thought that an mRNA vaccine would be very different for influenza virus because the COVID mRNA vaccines do pretty well at inducing T-cell responses. So,
yeah. I like that because every year we always struggle getting people to get their flu shots. And one of the arguments people have always said is, they don't work that well. And well, if you could come back with, well, now they do, and get us to that higher level, I think that would be great all across the board. I would love a flu shot that worked better. And I don't mind, feeling crummy for a day to get that protection. And I think maybe people are starting to pay more attention to viruses. And, the flu isn't just the flu. It's not just, I might get sick with the flu. But, we look at our patients, and individuals who don't get the flu shot, they're about twice as likely to end up in the hospital for heart issues, all kinds of other things. Just because this, I think now people appreciate a pro-inflammatory post-infectious state that you get if instead of the vaccine, you let yourself catch the flu.
Yeah. And he did
all
say
your friends.
that he said that for flu, they monitor disease and hospitalization. They never look for infection, right?
Yeah.
After vaccination, because the vaccine doesn't prevent infection. He said it's really illness that we care. And when it gets above a certain level, we decide it's time to change the vaccine. And it could be that because the COVID, at least the mRNA vaccines, give you a good T-cell response, we might not have to change for some time, despite the doom and gloom that is being, portrayed in the media. I think they're going to last longer than we think, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, even the recent, Delta variant out of Israel data, I think when you get the details, we'll realize the sky has not fallen.
I agree. This recent study this is not TWiV, but anyway, this recent study out of Israel where they said, Pfizer is only 60% at preventing infection. Who cares about preventing infection? It's disease. I'm sure it was quite good at preventing disease still, right?
Yeah. But this is exciting. I think that this technology, right, potentially is going to cross over to malaria. And I'm excited that we'll have something to offer all the mice. And hopefully we'll move this into humans.
Yeah, we'll move to people. That would be good. And other pathogens as well. It could be that it has a very long effect, and that's a very long tail on other pathogens. That would be great.
Yep, excellent. We'll move this to all these neglected tropical diseases, and we'll be out of a job. So schistosomiasis, all the other big ones.
So we'll have nothing to talk about on TWiP or TWiV. Everything
it'll
will be
become
eradicated.
A historical show. I look forward to that. It'll be like guinea worm when that's finally gone, when we talk about once upon a time when there was guinea worm.
A historical show is okay. My son watches this YouTube channel. I forgot the name of it, but it's a guy who he does this day in World War II. July 7th, what happened? And he does a 20-minute. And I said to my son, do you think people would be interested in that kind of a show for infectious diseases, like this day during the 1918 pandemic? And he said, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, particularly now, I think a lot of people, what happened in 1918, if we had remembered that better, we wouldn't have all been locked away in our homes and suffered quite as much as we did. We would have had better tools, better tools. So,
well, since Dixon is not here, we don't have a hero, but I assume we can have a new case study, right?
I have an exciting new case study. I've been nice to people during the pandemic, but it's time to get some more challenging stuff here. So I warn our listeners, you're going to have to put on your thinking hats. And I'm going back to my this is a pre-pandemic case. This one is going to be exciting and challenging. I already have an exciting and challenging one that we'll be talking about next time. So everyone get ready. So what is our case for next time? This is the case of a 30-year-old woman. She comes in to be seen. She's sent in as a referral. She's been having these areas of swelling. They seem to be in different parts of her arms, different parts of the body. And her blood work shows elevated eosinophils. So we get a little more history. She reports that prior to this, she had been traveling around different areas of Southeast Asia. She did have some loose stools right when she got back. She reports some tingling in her fingers, but otherwise she says that she feels fine. Got a little more information. She says that when she traveled, she was an adventurous eater, trying a lot of the cuisines in different areas, fresh fish, some of sort of the pickled fish and other local dishes that they like to do. She says that prior to this, she had been in very good health. So her past medical history, she had no issues prior to this, no surgeries. She doesn't report any allergies. She said her family history is unremarkable. Everyone in the family seems pretty healthy. She doesn't take any medications on a regular basis. She does. She lives by herself in the New York tri-state area. As far as her travel history, she went to some of the islands in Indonesia as well as Thailand. And I mentioned the local dishes while traveling. As far as toxic habits, I know Vincent cares about those. She does not smoke tobacco. She does drink alcohol periodically. She is HIV negative, right? They've done a pretty significant workup prior to having her sent for infectious disease consultation. Now on exam, the exam really is remarkable for a swollen area on the arm. She says this is very similar to what she's been experiencing. And this area on the arm, it's arranged and a biopsy is done of this lump on her arm. And the pathologist report is that the cross-section has what appears to be a cross-section of a larval nematode. And our listeners have to guess what larval nematode may have been seen on this biopsy.
How big are these swellings? A few centimeters, you think?
Yeah, they're a couple centimeters.
Okay.
Raised, a little bit itchy.
All right. So she lives alone, but she has some family locally. Is that right?
Yeah, she has family locally.
And they're all okay, right?
Everyone else is okay. Yeah, she's single. She's unmarried.
HIV negative. Any other, did they do a Hep C test?
Yeah, so all the others, so hepatitis C is negative, hepatitis B is negative.
Okay. And this is pre-COVID or post or during COVID?
So this was right before COVID. So,
okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of these cases we're not seeing so much of anymore, but now we're starting to see the travelers again.
So you said she liked to eat the pickled fish. Did she like to eat salads?
Yeah, she said that she just ate what was available, all the local dishes. So the different fish, the salads. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Dixon would be signaling to me that he got it, I guess.
I think, yeah, we can vicariously put the Dixon persona in here, who probably already knows what it is.
All right, folks, put your thinking caps on and check it out. We'll be back in about a month from now, right? That's typically, we did skip June.
Yes, probably mid August, hopefully. So we won't give people as much time, because hopefully Dixon will be ready to join us. Christina will be back from vacation.
Yeah. All right. And I know we have accumulated a bunch of emails. One of these days we'll get to them, because there's some interesting ones here for sure. But we'll save that for another time. And that is TWiP 196. You can find the show notes at microbe.tv/TWiP. If you want to send in a guess or just send us an email, twip@microbe.tv. If you want to support us, well, you could support Microbe TV, microbe.tv/contribute, or you could support Parasites Without Borders. You go over to parasiteswithoutborders.com, or you could do both. Be a hero. Daniel Griffin's at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, parasiteswithoutborders.com. Thank you, Daniel.
Oh, a pleasure as always.
I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.blog. I'd like to thank the American Society for Microbiology for their support of TWiP, and Ronald Jenkins for the music. You've been listening to This Week in Parasitism. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. Another TWiP is parasitic.